The question is, how long can we do this? Well, we've got two big problems. I talked about one of them at the beginning here, the financial issue. We've printed about all the money we can. If you look at our bond market, our 10-year, which is usually seen as the bellwether of serious crises, is at about 4.5, 4.6%. Most experts in the bond markets say that if we hit 5% in the 10-year bond, our entire financial structure will collapse. That's one constraint. Second constraint, we only have so many missiles, and we're running out. And we can't manufacture them fast enough to keep up with the demand for the war. The Iranians, on the other hand, they've put everything into manufacturing, they've put it underground, and they can turn out missiles and unmanned systems at a much higher rate, much greater speed than we can. And behind them stand preeminently China and Russia. China is heavily invested in Iran. It buys most of Iran's oil. In addition to that, though, Iran is a key player in the Chinese Belt and Road. This is the structure of transportation and commerce the Chinese and the Russians have collaborated on across Central Asia so that you would be able to effectively move goods from Shanghai overland all the way to Rochefort on the west coast of France, and then from there to the United States or anywhere else in the Western Hemisphere, and do it very quickly and less expensively. So they're invested there, but they also see something else. Remember, we have imprudently threatened the Chinese on numerous occasions, especially about Taiwan. And the Chinese are not interested in that. We have the Shanghai Communique, which we signed in 1973, that said Taiwan is part of China. End of story. And everybody's accepted that until we got to Joe Biden and now Donald Trump. So the Chinese are saying, well, there's no interest on our part or incentive on our part to try and broker a quote-unquote deal with the United States if that means the United States turns around and tries to attack us. And the good news to the Chinese that all of the technology that they would rely on in a war against us is performing brilliantly against us in Iran. So you put all of this together, it's a pretty grim picture right now. We're not going to win anything. And I think asking that question right up front is key. Well, what the hell are we winning? And nobody can really tell you that. Well, we're making Israel great again. I mean, that's some people will laugh and say that, you know.
The discussion now shifts from military objectives to the financial side of the conflict. MacGregor links energy prices, debt, supply chains, and global markets, arguing that the economic consequences could ultimately become just as significant as the geopolitical ones.
I understand completely, and I think that particular picture that you've shown everybody is a very good one. We need to understand that when the American government embarked on discussions with the Iranians under President Obama, the goal was to find a way out of this one-way street to nuclear weapons. The Iranians were receptive because the Iranians concluded it made more sense for them to become and remain a nuclear threshold state than it did to become a nuclear-armed state. In other words, we're going to enrich uranium to a certain level, 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever. And this is going to be for industrial, internal, and medical use only. And they always knew, and we knew, that they would still be able, in an emergency or a crisis, to enrich it to 90+% to create plutonium. Plutonium being the critical component of a nuclear weapon. That's enriched uranium, highly enriched uranium. We call it plutonium. But we said, fine, that works for us. We set up a system that allowed international monitoring so that if the Iranians decided that they were going to press ahead and start ramping up, we would know about it. And the Iranians basically said to the Trump administration, who walked away from this, well, if you're walking away from the agreement, we have no choice but to enrich uranium to a point where, if we have to, we could conceivably build a weapon. However, the supreme leader at the time, whom we recently assassinated, along with his whole family, had stated that it was fundamentally immoral and illegal for Iran to have nuclear weapons. And the Iranian state followed that prohibition. He is gone. His family was killed. His son has succeeded him, I guess. And there is now talk inside Iran of potentially building a nuclear weapon. Now, why would they want to do that? Well, I think it has something to do with the relentless, unending attacks of Israeli and American armed forces on Iran, because the lesson historically that was learned back in 1991 was if you don't want to end up like Saddam Hussein, you really need a nuclear weapon to deter the Americans from attacking you. We didn't face a nuclear threat in Iraq, so we could use our high-end conventional dominance. Well, if you have a nuclear weapon, suddenly your high-end conventional dominance is no longer a guarantee of victory, because you could suddenly lose great quantities of people and equipment to a nuclear strike. I can't predict the future. I'm not Nostradamus. But I think in retrospect, we can say, first of all, it was a very serious mistake to end that agreement. That agreement may not have been perfect, but worked. The problem is it was always an Israeli talking point. The lobby opposed it. The lobby didn't want an agreement because the lobby wants the destruction of the regime and ultimately now the society and the state. That's, as far as the Israelis are concerned and their Jewish billionaire backers in the United States, Israel cannot exist in the region if there is a powerful nuclear-armed Iran.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So could this end in like a nuclear disaster? Do you think Trump has the, I guess, cojones to like nuke Iran or something like that? Could this get as bad as that?
Well, as irrational and emotional as he often is, I do think he understands that the use of a nuclear weapon would be catastrophic for the world. Now, why is that? Because if he or the Israelis or the Iranians or anybody else used a nuclear weapon, that would end the widely accepted, almost universal consensus that nuclear weapons are off the table for anything other than defense of national territory. That's very important because that was what the Soviets agreed to. That's what we agreed to in fundamental terms. We will not use a nuclear weapon against each other. We will confine our use of a nuclear weapon, if it becomes necessary, to the defense of our homeland. That's all. If we were to use one over there against Iran, we're no longer defending our homeland. Of course, we're not defending our homeland as it is, but we're now legitimating the use of a nuclear weapon for purposes other than homeland defense. So I don't think President Trump will do that. I hope I'm right, but all things are possible. I worry much more about the Israelis because they have various programs, one of which is called the Samson option, that effectively say if we think someone else in the region has a nuclear weapon or we could be nuked, then we will preempt and we will nuke them. I hope not, because I think that would spell the end for Israel. Israel's a very small state. If they were to use such a weapon and there was a nuclear response, which I think they could almost certainly reckon with, that would be the end of Israel. Now, would the Iranians use a nuclear weapon if they have it? I don't know. I don't think so. I have heard rumors on the internet that the decision makers in Tehran are discussing the use of a nuclear device as a demonstration somewhere down in the open deserts of southern Iran, a small nuclear detonation just to demonstrate to everyone we have it, on the assumption that that'll scare everyone off. And my argument against that was very simple. If you do that, you make it inevitable that the Israelis will strike you, because they'll say, see, there's a nuclear weapon. To survive, we have to strike Iran. That would be catastrophic. And I don't see how such an action would not result in the inevitable intervention into the larger war by Russia and China, and potentially others. Clearly, the Turks would then rapidly gain access to a weapon from Pakistan, no doubt in my mind. Then Israel would have a nuclear-armed Turkey right on its border. So, my advice, and it's been from the beginning, Daryl, President Trump, quit, stop. Yeah. There is no good military solution to this problem. Don't waste any more time. We don't live in the region. We just don't live there. We have demonstrated that we cannot protect the partners that we have in the region. The United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. We can't. And that's what the Iranians have demonstrated to their friends on the west side of the Persian Gulf. You've sponsored these bases. You've threatened us. Welcome to the party. If you do this in the future, we will annihilate you. So there's not much we can do about that. And I think what we need to do, and this is something that all great powers should consider doing, is telling some of the smaller states with whom we have good relations, don't drag us into your war. Get along with your neighbor. In other words, if you're Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Slovakia, whomever, don't run to us and try to involve us in a war with Russia. Try to get along with your neighbor. That's something that we used to do. We did that in the 19th century. We need to get back to that because we don't see any benefit to being involved in other people's wars. We are fighting someone else's war. This is a war on behalf of the state of Israel and its supporters in the United States. It is not a war that benefits the United States in any way, shape, or form.
MacGregor closes by shifting the conversation away from today's headlines and toward long-term resilience. His final message emphasizes the importance of resource security, industrial capacity, and strategic preparedness in an increasingly uncertain world. Whether or not you agree with his perspective, the broader takeaway is that countries may need to become more self-reliant as global risks continue to evolve.
Let me finish up on one point. I just want to mention this because I think it's so important for Canada as well as for us. Regardless of who comes to power in the future, however this government comes and goes, we're Americans and Canadians. We have to think about something that I call resource sovereignty. That's resource independence. We are struggling right now because we did not pay attention to the fact that you can find rare earths all over the world. It's refining them. It's developing alloys based on them that requires enormous quantities of energy. Heating minerals to 1100 or 1200 degrees centigrade. That means enormous quantities of energy coming either from coal, oil, or nuclear power, or hydropower. We don't have these refineries that we need. In other words, even if we were sitting on top of 50 tons of potential rare earths, we couldn't do much about it. If you want to refine your rare earth, you have to send it right now to Indonesia. Why? Because the Japanese invested money so that they could extract the rare earths down there and refine them down there. The Japanese were very smart. They did that in 2010 when the Chinese refused to export any more rare earths to them. We didn't pay any attention. We should have. And we need to start looking carefully at all these critical minerals, and I include gold and silver, uranium. There's a list that the U.S. government has that's 60 long, 60 minerals, including rare earths. We have to build our own sovereignty because whether we like it or not, over time, we may have to become Fortress America because we will not have access to many of the things overseas we have had in the past. I would argue that a lot of that is our fault because we've meddled in other people's affairs where we shouldn't have. But we need to prepare for it and need to think about it. I hope your leadership in Canada will, and I'm hopeful that we will, but we'll see.
What do you think? Do you agree with Douglas MacGregor's assessment? Or do you see the situation differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this interview, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future conversations covering geopolitics, the global economy, and the forces shaping our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.